All right, I think we're back. My Auntie Betty just called and it made me screw up my live stream. So this is the song I wrote for my grandparents who went to the Flanders Indian boarding school. Grandfather ran away 4 times. My grandmother graduated with honors and became a teacher. And she would always say the same thing when I would sing this song. She would go, "I don't care what you say. I loved Flanders." And I had to, I would forget. For those of you who don't know what boarding schools were, the basic story they tell you about boarding schools is that they were kind of a Catholic school / military school. They were very strict, harsh, and they were set up to teach English, and they didn't allow any and assimilate kids. They didn't allow any of the kids to speak their native language. You couldn't have anything that made you identify as a native. So you had to cut your hair. You couldn't wear any beadwork or anything like that. And every story about Indian history has some scene where there's a little boy with his braids, getting them cut off and his big old tears. And that's true in part. Another way of looking at these schools is that they were exactly like the Catholic schools that traumatized so many non-Indian kids. There was abuse, and the kids, were hundreds of miles away from home, and there was no way to communicate back and forth. And it was another big government bureaucracy thing. But, so I had 2 grandparents, one who hated boarding school, one who loved boarding school. And so I won't sing the whole song, but this was a song I wrote for my grandfather. Hey, Mark! I was born in 1913 in the storm of 1913. But then at boarding school, I was nobody's fool. Down at Flanders, I grew madder every day. That's why I had to run away. 'Cause this is no way to live. And I wanna go home. I wanna go home. I wanna go home. I wanna go. And then rock out. And it was basically a song talking about how he escaped from boarding school, and by jumping on a train and heading north, and how the cops would pick him up and bring him back to boarding school. My grandpa was the family favorite. He was so loved by our family. He was funny. He was also a veteran of World War II. He was in Guadalcanal. And as a young man, he was a fishing guide for, he and his brothers and his dad started a business in Bina called Lyons Landing. And they would take out tourists on fishing trips. You could go fishing with the real Indians on a real Indian lake. And they had a booming business of fishing, guiding, and stuff like that. And it was back in the time when, during Prohibition, a lot of gangsters from Chicago would come up to Bena to vacation. And he knew Al Capone. And there was a story that was carried on about how Al Capone once told my grandfather to go get him firewood. And my grandfather said, "Get your own firewood." And everybody was like, "Holy man, I can't believe you talked to Al Capone that way." But I mean, like, what's Al Capone going to do? Shoot him? Hey, BOOZHOO, Ginny. Ginny Carney is here. So good to see her too. And Dan, nice to see you. So yeah, boarding schools, it's more nuanced. The more I learn about history and Indian history, I've finally come to a point where I realized I'm going to talk about this during the Building Bridges Zoom meeting call thing. But when I was at the tribal college, there was a lot of talk about colonization. And Bob Jourdain coined the term colonized mind. That a lot of people, Indian people too, have a mindset that is colonized. Not assimilated, but have a worldview that's no longer native. You know, they've adopted what they were taught from, US, from white schools and stuff like that. But some of the stuff we were taught is also the narrative. We forget that our history, what we're learning through what white people have recorded about history. And when you really look at it, the story all of history that's taught in school is so simplistic. It's like fairy tales. They talk about, George Washington never told a lie and he chopped down a cherry tree and he was the first president. And then you grow up and you go, wait a second. Was he really the first president or was he the 8th president? Did he really never lie? Was he a Freemason? When I was a kid, the Columbus story is another one of those. The first time we heard about Columbus, even in the early 70s, they said, okay, this isn't really the truth, but they used to believe that Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492 and discovered America. But we know that there were already Native Americans here, and so he didn't discover it. But the boarding school story is kind of summed up in a movie where they say, once upon a time, Indian people lived in harmony with nature. We lived like Tarzan, basically. We didn't have any metal objects. We fished with spears, and we're really primitive people. And then the white man came, stole our land, stole the kids, and put them in these evil boarding schools and assimilated them against their will. And that's why we're so messed up today. And, hey, Mary, good to see you. And I believed that for many years and never understood my grandmother. Like, how could you love boarding school? I don't get it. And then we went to the all-school reunion in Flandreau, and she was the second oldest woman there. And at the time, I think she was like 83. And there was a woman there who was like 90. And like Floyd Red Quill Westerman, the guy who played the old chief in Dances with Wolves, was there talking about how much he loved Flandreau. And you saw that the school grounds were beautiful. It was like a college in the middle of nowhere. And you looked through their yearbooks, and they had every sport. They had horse riding. They had dances and girls basketball. My grandmother said she was the first one to make skirts, essentially. They had skirts, but the girls would get embarrassed when they jump up for rebounds and layups because their underwear would show. Well, one of the classes they had in boarding school was home ec, where they learn how to sew and cook and all this stuff. And so they sewed up these skirts into big shorts and started playing basketball that way. My grandmother became an athlete and a scholar. She went on to college. She was well educated at boarding school. And she had good relationships with some teachers. The teachers weren't all evil like you'll see in movies. And, you know, she loved boarding school. And I had to finally go, I get it now. The other thing I noticed, when you look at the yearbooks in boarding schools, they'll also have stuff like Flandreau, the different trades available. You could learn carpentry and farming and all this stuff. But there wasn't a single overweight Native American student. It'd be a class of like 50, 75 students in the senior class, all looking fit, well-fed. They worked hard, but they also they grew their own food. They had a farm there. After, 12 years, I mean, let's face it, Laporte, Mark McAllister, if you're still here, we did nothing but complain about what a stupid school that was. But now when I look back, I think it was a great school. It was really small. We got to do everything. We had 3 sports, theater, music programs, talent shows, and we had the same adults. The teachers stayed around year after year. If you go to Bemidji High School, Native students don't even know the names of half their teachers because they'll get them once and never see them again. Our teachers were like uncles and aunts. Yeah, Mark, it was. I miss it. Laporte was a really good school that both Mark and I barely graduated from. And so, to the kids' perspective, yeah, there's some horror stories about boarding school. Lots. Just like there are horror stories about Catholic schools. And it doesn't make a very good movie to just show kids happy, so it's always some tragic story. But I'm starting to think part of the colonized mind is to define ourselves by the U.S. government history books. It really paints us as victims. One of the things I never talk about is how, like my grandfather's dad got paid to have his kids go to a boarding school. He made $60 per kid, which is a lot of money in those days. And, here's this, full-blooded Indian dude sending his kids off to boarding school. That was his decision. They didn't do that against, And that's another thing. We get this idea that, evil white government came in and stole the children. And that every Indian community in the entire country were powerless to defend against like one guy. And I don't think it was like that. There was a certain agreement, and our elders have to take some responsibility. When the treaties were written, it was Indian people who said, okay, we'll fight no more forever, but we don't want our kids to be second-class citizens. We want our kids to have the same advantages as your kids. So you need to come up with some schools that will teach them English, teach them math, science, all this stuff to make them competitive in this white world that's coming in. And that's what they did. You don't hear that side of the story much. Anyway, Claudette Marie. How you doing, Claudette? Claude. From Onigum. When I was a kid, my grandpa always called it Onigum. And I'd be like, Grandpa, it's called Onigum. And then when I learned Ojibwe, I learned that the O is always long, like in OJIBWE. You don't call it OJIBWE. O's are long O's. And so my grandpa, he pronounced it the correct way, Onigum. Onigum's a really interesting place. A number of years ago, I had a summer program there where I would show up at like 9 in the morning, and I don't know, 15 to 20 little kids, two of which being Claudette's kids, would come down, and we had we'd play kickball, and I put on a play. I've written some books, some children's books that have to do with Ojibwe culture and language and stuff. And one of the books I wrote was called BOOZHOO, OJIBWE. And BOOZHOO, OJIBWE is about a little squirrel who goes... No, it's not. I mean, I did write a book called BOOZHOO, OJIBWE, but the play I did was called Little Cutie, a Teddy Bear's Vision Quest. And in Onigum, I had all these kids come down, and we practiced and put on this play. And the story is a teddy bear that goes on a vision quest, and he thinks his human is outgrowing him, and so he goes on a vision quest to see where he belongs. Along the way, he meets all these woodland animals with Ojibwe names, and so the kids would come down, and we'd have little meal, little breakfast, you know, sandwiches and chips and stuff. And we'd play kickball and that. And we'd practice this play. And at the end of it all, we went to the Walker School, and the same gym, Mark, you'll remember our first basketball game as 7th graders. We played in the crappy little gym in Walker that was on their stage in their auditorium. You know, just a great basketball game. Because when you're 7th grade and it's, you know, all your buddies against a bunch of strangers from the big city of Walker. And I don't remember if we won or lost. I just remember that I scored 6 points. And I still have Taya's costume she wore for the play. Yeah. And there was music in the play and stuff. It was so much fun. And sometimes I'd take the kids into town, and I'd have like 6, 7 kids in my car. And I'd make them strap up and share seatbelts and that. And one of the games that we'd do is like we'd go to Dairy Queen, and I would act really obnoxious and pretend I was their dad. And they'd be like, "He's not my dad." I'd be like, "Yeah, I'd like a booger shake, please." And but it was really fun. When we'd see a cop, somebody would just yell "cop," and all the kids would like put their heads down so they wouldn't see that I was driving totally illegally with all these children. But those kids are all like grown up teenagers now. I hate it. But I had a lot of fun there. Place is overrun with dogs, and I'm kind of afraid of dogs. But I learned in Onigum that when the big dogs come by, you can, you know, throw rocks at them, get them to leave if you have to. I remember one day this little girl was just in tears beside herself, and she goes, "I hate dogs." And, "Why do you hate dogs?" She goes, "He ate my cat." One of the dogs had gotten a hold of her cat and killed him. I'm like, "Yeah, you're right, I hate dogs too." So that was Onigum. And again, it was another one of those things where I had an opportunity. I became the Indian Ed director at Walker High School for a few years. You know, if I didn't have this Indian privilege, I never would have had most of the jobs I've had. And so back to, yeah, is that town racist? Are you a victim of racism? I'm like, nope. Sorry. It's only been a blessing. All right, let me, I've probably been on long enough. Let me bring up these guys one more time. NANABOOZHOO, you want to come and say something to the folks before we sign off? Yeah, I sure would. La 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 la. How to get to NANABOOZHOO? Okay, hey, BOOZHOO. Yeah, so I'm NANABOOZHOO, and you can see our videos. I try to do one every day. It usually turns out to be about every other day. But we have a YouTube channel. You can see all our videos. And if you'd like to support the show, go to YouTube. We got links to PayPal and Patreon. But you guys are mostly friends, so I don't expect you to give me anything. And yeah, so I'm NANABOOZHOO. The show is called BOOZHOO NANABOOZHOO, which means hello, NANABOOZHOO. And I'll let Michael explain what NANABOOZHOO means. And yeah, thanks for watching. GOFUNDME Minoa. I will see you again. So that's NANABOOZHOO. And NANABOOZHOO was the, most of the time if you hear a folk story in Ojibwe, it's the human characters will be NANABOOZHOO. And he's portrayed a number of different ways. Sometimes he can be a shapeshifter who grows like rabbit ears and whatever. But so that just means that. And then of course, the real star of the show. La 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 is Natasha. Hello everybody. What should I say? Do you just want to explain who you are? My name is Natasha. Natasha Nindijanakaz. That's not my last name. Nindijanakaz means is my name. And I help teach. What else? Natasha is also really good at singing harmonies because she's you know, kind of has perfect pitch with NANABOOZHOO. That's right. La 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 la. All right. Well, I'll talk to you later. And not now. And so that's Natasha. What else? Where was I going with this? I don't know. My kids still talk about all we did and hang out and the play. Made a great impact on them. We had so much fun with it. Thank you so much for saying that. I actually think about them a lot. Every once in a while I'll see a picture of Tia on, you know, Facebook or something. And I'm like, oh, she's grown up to be a beautiful young lady. And I just, like, what happened to that little kid with the, you know, little belly and stuff? I wish these kids didn't grow up. So let me call this a show. I finally figured out how to do this, so maybe I'll do this fairly regularly, like once a week or once a month or something. Awesome seeing the people who, you know, like Mark and you guys from LaPorte. Yeah, and I'll let you know when I'm on the Zoom call. For people in Bemidji and Grand Rapids, if you tune into KAXE and KBXE radio station, community radio, Monday mornings at 8, NANABOOZHOO and Natasha do an Ojibwe word of the day, which is pretty funny. Is what I was supposed to be doing tonight, but I decided to do this instead. And Mark, great to see you, buddy. Mark, we're also proud of him because he's I think he was in the Navy. I'm pretty sure he was a Navy, he was some sort of seaman. No, he was in the Army. And he was a paratrooper. He's one of those guys who like jumped out of planes and, you know, defended our freedom. But and now he's like crushing in Alaska. But so yeah, I'm gonna call it a night. And in Ojibwe, we don't say goodbye, we say I will see you again. So I'm gonna say GOFUNDME Minoa. I will see you again.